Hey guys, and welcome to LBB91. We're talking to you guys about the weight. Talking about Devon and Megan Good. They have unfortunately come to a conclusion that they want to divorce from one another. And I want to talk about this part two. This part two is dealing with celibacy won't save your marriage. It won't save your marriage. What do I mean by this? You know, people assume by not having sex that they actually reduce the problem of their marriage. Like, if we don't have sex before marriage, it means we're going to be able to work out. Now, it sounds very mundane and very obvious that this is not the truth, but a lot of people actually hold this type of kind of mindset. And so I want to kind of break it down with Devon and Megan Good, because a lot of people were celebratory of them because they managed to highlight the need for celibacy before marriage. And I'm going to say this again. I definitely agree that you want to be abstaining from sex before marriage because it helps to make informed decisions. We want to abstain because it helps also as well to reduce the likelihood of falling into a deeper state of emotional connection, which might not necessarily be there, but being pushed by the chemicals that are released within sex, the endorphins, serotonin, oxytocin, right, which can kind of mask the truth of what you're actually seeing. So we're going to talk a little bit about that on this episode. If you're new to the channel, do me a favor, like it, share, subscribe, click on the bell button for notification of uploads. We appreciate guys stay locked and stay loaded. And for those of you who are returning, you already know what it is, baby. You have got the minerals. All right. Let's quickly talk about this. So, when we talk about celibacy and you talk about the weight, we saw Megan Good and Devon Franklin, they, 9 years ago tied the knot and, very frankly pushed the idea of celibacy being great and how celibacy helped for them to develop the relationship they have. I want you to pay attention. Notice how even though they had not had sex, been intentional about not having sex, been intentional about not having relations, and yet they spoke about in other interviews where he said he had to sacrifice a lot, and he used the word sacrifice. And what people don't realize about sacrifice is if you make too many sacrifices, you're dead. In a marriage, it's not necessarily about sacrifice, it's about compromise. Okay? There are things that can be sacrificed. There are things that need to be sacrificed, but there are things that people will sacrifice and it makes a marriage break up. What do I actually mean by this? It means, in totality that when you have issues in a relationship, for instance, let me give you an example of what I mean by this. I personally love dancing, yeah? So you see me on the streets, on TikTok dancing, If I get with somebody and they tell me, you know what, I don't like you dancing like that publicly, I need you to stop. If I decide to give up dancing there and there, more than likely that's a sacrifice, not a compromise. Because I love what I do, right? And I love doing it. So you telling me not to dance in public, great, okay, not to dance at all, is a massive sacrifice. And the trouble with this is most people are not really ready for that sacrifice. Or when they sacrifice, it is from a place of selfishness. It's so that next time they can also tell you, can you sacrifice this? It's duplicitous sometimes in its nature. When we talk about sacrifice versus compromise, big difference. There are certain things, like I said, that just can't be sacrificed because the person will end up resenting you and being annoyed at you. Now, if you tell me I say, we agree on something. Let's say, for instance, I come home at work at 7 because I take an extra hour to do one or two things. And you say to me, look, coach, can you not come home at 7? Can you come home at 6? Because I want to spend some time with us, get some quality time in, blah, blah, blah. Right? I can go, do you know what? That 7 isn't necessarily so important. Right? It's not life or death. I can compromise on that and go, let's work at 8. Okay, I'll come at 6, blah, blah, blah. It's not going to kill me. Right? It's a compromise. When we make too many sacrifices, we bleed out. Because the sacrifice involves something dying, death, blood. And so we see the same thing here in this relation. Now, I was on the Emperor or Empressive YouTube page. Shout out to her. She made a great commentary on Devon and Megan Good. If you haven't watched it, go watch it because she gave a good breakdown. And she played a clip of the conversation between Devon, Aliana, and Megan Good. And one of the things that he actually said was he had to sacrifice to incorporate her into his life, basically. He had to sacrifice parts to be able to bring her back into life. And that, for me, set off a little bit of a red flag, because don't get it twisted, compromise one thing, but if you're having to sacrifice before you even get into a relationship, that might not be the relationship for you. Am I saying you don't have to change? No, I'm saying to you that if you're having to sacrifice in order to be able to fit somebody in, more than likely it's going to be a problem down the line. Right? Because, like I said, when you sacrifice, you're having to die to something. All right? Something that you love is being given up. When Jesus sacrificed himself for mankind, he did it out of love. Okay? One of the most painful things to do, hurtful things to do, but he had to do it. Okay? When Old Testament leads to sacrifice, they sacrifice something, an animal, and it will be given in blood. It will be blood that will be paid. It's painful to give these things up. And one of the things he said that he gave up was his list. Now, listen, I've heard it said by some preachers, and I've got no problem with them saying this, but they've said, obviously, tear up that list. Nah, don't tear up that list. Tear up the list. You don't know what God's going to do. No, sis, you don't need to tear up the list. Okay? You only tear up your list if it's superficial. You don't tear up the list if it has good characteristics and qualities of what a man or a woman should have. And if those qualities are essential for you going forward in a marriage. All right, him being 6 foot, it's not essential. It's superficial. But if you want 6 foot, by all means, have it on the list. But that can be a negotiable, not a non-negotiable. The question I'm really asking, I guess, from Devon Franklin and Megan Good was, for him on his list, were there negotiables or non-negotiables that he said he shouldn't date? For instance, he mentioned he didn't want to date an actress, somebody who drinks, and somebody who smokes, and yet she did all of those things. At the beginning, at least, she was growing in her faith, right? And sometimes what can happen is we can start talking for God, and God ain't spoken nothing on the subject. And I want to talk a little bit about that in another video, maybe. When I said about God is not going to save your marriage, right? But coming back onto it, so I've kind of strayed a little bit left in saying this, but he had a list which he said about sacrifice. He said he had to sacrifice his list. He didn't want to worship his list. No, but there are specific criterias that someone should have. Like, for instance, for me, I know I need somebody who's gonna enjoy service, because I enjoy serving others. If you can't enjoy serving others and you get a bit up-nosed and frowned upon it, I don't want it. Not because you ain't good, but because you're not good for me. And this is important too. Being selfless is also being selfish. Not you now killing off your ambition or killing off, what you need in terms of being a partner so that it can fit this narrative. Look, what it sounds like to me after listening to that video is that there's been some working around, patchwork being done to squeeze somebody into a size 8 when you were size 10, baby. You a size 10 trying to slip your foot into a size 8. You ever done that before? Girls and guys, you've done that before. You know exactly what it is, right? Like, ladies, you know when it is when you're squeezing your toes into a shoe, especially a high heel, and your toes are hanging over the edge. Man, them know as well when you got that favorite trainer that you used to like, and your foot now is touching the rim of the shoe. Come on, it's a painful experience when you're walking it. Right? And so this is the thing. People are squeezing themselves into things, and sometimes we over-spiritualize certain things. So yes, I'm saying please keep your list if it's not superficial. Keep your list if it's got non-negotiables that are essential. Do you know what I mean? Yeah? Keep your list on it. Yeah? But back onto the point I'm talking about, which is celibacy won't save your marriage. What I mean by this is, they got to the stage and they didn't have sex. They spoke about the weight. They spoke about how they have made sure they've been intentional, and yet we're still here. So this is one of the things I learned I'm learning from people that are married and people that are divorced and people that are, going through it and stuff. Marriage is work. And if you're not willing to do the work, get out. Faith without works is dead. Guess where it starts from? It starts from faith that turns into works. When you believe in what you are and what your marriage is meant to be, then the works can come forth from it, okay? So we have to put work in. God can't do everything, and that's another separate thing. When I say God can't do everything, he's not going to force people to do things. He may speak to the heart of an individual. He doesn't force them to do it. This is where you and I must come into it, which is why 30-fold, 60-fold, 100-fold, there's a reaping of, because people, Paul says in 1 Corinthians 14, where he speaks about, was it 14, verse 15? It might be, sorry. Chapter 15, sorry. Where he talks about the fact that by grace, I am what I am. But I worked harder than every single one. And even that is by grace. You, by grace, must begin to work in your marriage. And that's something I'm trying to really incorporate into my mindset, because it's a mindset that there is, no matter how compatible I am with somebody, they're going to get tired. No matter how compatible I am with somebody, they're going to think about maybe potentially leaving a relationship. No matter how compatible I am with somebody else, they may think about cheating. No matter how compatible I am with somebody else, there may be things that turn their head. But will they work? Will they put the work in? See, celibacy doesn't necessarily prove that. Celibacy is good because it helps you be disciplined, and it stops you being infatuated. That will allow you to cast aside to cast aside people that are not good enough for you, and that you are seeing them through sexual eyes. But it doesn't necessarily aid and abet you in the area of this person wanting to work, right? That's a hustle mindset. That's a work mindset. You got to tap in somebody and ask them, are you ready to work? Because that's what marriage is about. Compromises, work, a willingness to step up in the places of adversity. That's what I'm seeing. Am I saying people that divorced are not working? No. I'm merely saying that is the key instrument that we are talking about in these marriages. Are you ready to work? And here's the thing, the difficulty behind this is starting off with the right kind of person is the most important, because that will help go a long way in how you begin to work, and the stamina people have to work, and the energy people have to work, and the strength people have to work. The Bible says, do not be unequally unyoked. You don't unyoke oxen. That doesn't just mean Christian and non-Christian. It means mindsets. It means, how do you view marriage? It means, because in one of the interviews, when I listened to, I think it was Empress's video, she put on a clip where Megan began to speak about about her ideas of marriage. She said, you know what, she never really saw marriage in her future. She never... That was not her thing originally. She never really saw marriage, And I realized her image of marriage was even off. So now, did we have conversations around our images on what we think of marriage and what it's supposed to be? Because someone who hasn't got that same image as you can end up trying to give up earlier because they don't have the same vision. And the lack of vision, lack of knowledge, my people perish. But the lack of knowledge is that the fact there's a lack of illumination and a lack of light that allows you to see in darkness. So there are people out here who don't see the visions that you see and cannot work the way you need them to work because they never had the knowledge that they needed to be able to do this work. That means this relationship could have been saved. But they've tried. I'm sure they've tried. And I'm not cussing them, by the way. I'm just merely stating things for us as well to kind of see from behind the scenes, right? Celibacy isn't saving your marriage. It doesn't guarantee, what I mean by that is, it doesn't guarantee that you're going to stay married. You got to work. See, salvation that we get from Jesus Christ is guaranteed. You're going to get to heaven. You got a one-way ticket to heaven. Regardless of what you choose to do from here on out, if you give your life to Christ, He is going to transport you to heaven. Question is, what is the healthiness and the quality of state of life you are going to have as a Christian? That requires you to put working, effort in, discipline. Paul says, I discipline my body like one that is trying to run for a prize. The same thing is how we deal with marriage. Because remember, the first marriage is the lamb to his children. And what we see with that is the enduring spirit of the lamb. And that's what the Bible says, that these are the gifts of the fruits of the Holy Spirit: endurance, kindness, patience, etc., right? These are the fruits we see in Galatians 5. And in marriage, it is no different. There is a need for this endurance that cometh, one, spiritually and physically. You know what you're going through. You know how to fight, and you know how to war, and you know how to keep fit in this race that you're running with this marriage. Right? So again, this is nothing's a guarantee. But it's more of a case of talking about some of the things that we know that we can help, sustain these marriages and relationships. Do we have the same idea on marriage? Do we have the same idea? Okay, all right. So because there are behaviors that will never change from certain people. So the wait is good. Celibacy is actually really good. We want to encourage that. The Bible lets us know we should be waiting. We shouldn't be having sex before marriage. We shouldn't be fornicating, right? Because it creates this imbalance for you, because as a human being, you begin to look at the other person in a particular lens that is through this chemical reaction that's happening to you, through your body changing and responding sexually. So when you look at Megan Good and Devon, they did it right. But did they have different ideals when it comes to their marriage? Did he sacrifice too much? Because Megan, look, progressively, Megan has got, I would call it, say, the roles that she's taken haven't always been quite light. And then this Harlem role she took, I said, "Woi." Beforehand she had a sex role, and she said about how Devon has supported her. Obviously, he's a Hollywood director, so he knows about them things. But the Harlem one, I was like, my God, that is a lot. And remember, she's gone through a lot as well in terms of her having to customize her image for the church. The church fans, they were cussing her earlier on a few years ago because she was not dressing like a woman of God or the first lady to them. She was dressing like she was still on the streets for them anyway, right? So I get it. That's how they were looking at things in that sense. So she's had a huge battle in terms of dealing with the community and the Christendom or religiosity, I would say, from them as well. So there's been quite a few things, I think, between the two of them which may have played into where they are now. But I want to encourage you and say, listen, celibacy ain't going to solve your issue. It's not going to solve your marriage. It's not going to mean that you're going to guarantee you're not going to be divorced. You've got to put the work in. You've got to put the work in. And I can't wait to talk about part 3, because I said this message: God won't save your marriage. And what I mean by that is he will save your marriage, but the greater context of what I mean by that is you've got to put some work in, and you've got to adhere to godly principles. And that is exclusive. That goes out to anybody. That's why non-Christians are making their marriages work, because they adhere to godly principles. And that's a video for another time. We're going to do part 3 for that coming up. So like, share, subscribe, click on the bell button for notification uploads. We appreciate you guys. Stay locked, stay loaded.